Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this International Women's Day. Today is the day when the world celebrates the women's achievements, reflects on gender equality, and recommits to justice. But for the Uyghur women, this day carries an additional weight because it's not only a celebration, it's a reminder of survival, resistance, and responsibility. As Uyghur women, so we carry our families, our culture, our faith, and our history within us. And we are mothers, daughters, scholars, activists, leaders, and today we are also witnesses. I'm deeply honored to share this conversation with three extraordinary Uyghur women whose courage continues to shape our community and amplify our voices globally. So our first speaker is Zümrüt Erkin, is an Uyghur human rights advocate and currently serves as Vice President of the World Uyghur Congress, an international organization representing the interests and rights of the Uyghur people. And Mrs. Erkin has been a prominent voice within the global Uyghur diaspora, advocating for the protection of Uyghur human rights and Uyghur human rights, and raising international awareness about the situation in Turkestan. In her leadership role at the World Uyghur Congress, she works on international outreach policy engagements and coordination within governments, as well as NGOs and multilateral institutions. The second honored guest, we have Rezwana Ilham, who is a dedicated Uyghur community leader and advocate serving as the president of the Uyghur community in Switzerland. So with a strong commitment on human rights, cultural preservation, and youth empowerment. As president, Rezwana works to promote awareness about the situation of Uyghurs, foster unity within the community, and build bridges with Swiss institutions, civil society organizations, and international partners. She's also been actively involved with the Youth Committee of the World Uyghur Congress, where she supports initiatives aimed to empower Uyghur youth worldwide. And the third honored guest, we've got Kawsar Kamil, who is a Uyghur activist and the chair of the Human Rights Committee at the World Uyghur Congress. She is the first She's the first Uyghur to have worked in the Canadian Parliament, serving MP Samir Zuberi and the Honourable Dominique LeBlanc. During her time in MP, Zuberi's office, she contributed to the development of Motion M65, which aims to resettle 10,000 vulnerable Uyghur refugees in unsafe third countries to Canada. I welcome you all. Thank you for sharing this platform today. And I would like to ask the first question to Zümrüt. So Uyghur women have long been the backbone of family and culture. So we have preserved our traditions, language, and identity across generations. So how has the role of Uyghur women evolved under the current political repression?
Thank you so much, Maida, for the kind introduction. I am so honored to share this platform with brilliant activists and colleagues of mine that I also get to call as friends. I'm so honored to be here. I think the question really goes back to the courage and bravery of Uyghur women in our community. I have not seen or witnessed women who are as brave, as resilient as Uyghur women, despite all of the ongoing challenges and genocide that we're currently going through. I think Uyghur women have long been underestimated for their role in society, but I think even back in during the Cultural Revolution time, when, for example, my parents and my grandparents also went through, and I actually come from a family where women were extremely brave. My grandmother raised her 4 kids on her own during the Cultural Revolution time, and so I have seen kind of these role models in my life where very strong women taking ownership of their identity and also being political as well. And I think even if you look back in the 90s when we had the Hulja massacre, Uyghur women played major parts in that uprising against Chinese state policies that were assimilating Uyghurs and erasing their ethnic and religious identity. And also in 2009, so leading up to the Urumqi massacre on July 5th, Uyghur women, Uyghur girls, students took the streets. They were not scared, so they started all of that, mass protest movement. And I think that's also an indication of the bravery and resilience of Uyghur women, that they do not tolerate injustice, human rights abuses, blatant violations of their freedoms. And I remember very well because I was there during the summer of 2009, witnessing so many young girls being arrested and detained and disappeared. A lot of Uyghur women journalists, writers, really write about the injustices of that summer, of the Urumqi massacre. And I think when the Uyghur genocide really started in 2016 with the mass arrest and disappearance of millions of Uyghurs, women really, I think, turned their loss and their stories of loss and trauma into tools of advocacy. So we've witnessed how, for example, the first women to really testify about the abuses were camp survivors, women camp survivors who came out of, of safety nets, basically, because once you're exposed, publicly, there's no going back. You become a target to the Chinese government of basically target of transnational repression. And I think a lot of the Uyghur women, I can just name a few: Qalb Nur Siddiq, Gulbahar Jalilova, Gulbahar, Haitibaji, Mihrigul Tursun, so many, Tursunay Ziauddin, so many of them testified about the horrors. I mean, we had evidence from outside, but of course it doesn't equal. It's not the same as direct evidence or direct testimony from these victims who actually survived those horrible camps, whether it was about the conditions inside the camps, the people who are detained, the length of detention, but also forced sterilization policies and assimilation policies. So I think Uyghur women played a vital role in exposing China's atrocity crimes, and even following the their testimonies, women testimonies, we've had Uyghur women advocates who started movements, mass movements, campaigns to really shine the light on not only Uyghur women's rights violations, but also Uyghur people as a whole, like the violations that we Uyghur people living through. And a lot of us have become advocates at a higher level, whether it's at the United Nations, in the Canadian Parliament, in the Swiss government or parliament, in the media. And I think that also really shows the determination that Uyghur women carry for their cause, for their people and their homeland.
Thank you very much, Mritai. So we just clearly see the transformation from cultural backbone to frontline advocate. So it's something that we see across our community. So my next question is to Kevser. So what does resilience look like for Uyghur women today, both inside East Turkestan and in the diaspora and exile? So I believe we don't have much information from the inside, but from what we have today, what you can say.
First of all, thank you so much for having me on this panel and giving me the opportunity to speak. I think that there are similarities in our resilience, both inside East Turkestan and in the diaspora abroad. So I think, as you said, because the information is very limited it is hard to gauge exactly, but from what we've heard and things that we've seen, I think that it can mean things like continuing to speak our language and keeping our culture with our children, even though it's discouraged by the government, preserving very simple things like Uyghur recipes and our cuisine and maybe even embroidery and our faith practices. Obviously, in private spaces, that's we cannot go to mosques in Turkestan, and can also mean just surviving the detentions, the surveillance, the forced sterilization, and the family separations. Really just being able to survive all of this and existing as Uyghur, as Muslims, as women and daughters. And I think that in itself is an act of resilience. In Uzbekistan, women's bodies and roles are really politicized, especially through like I said, reproductive control policies and cultural assimilation. So really just being able to resist all of this is really a sign of resilience in Uzbekistan. Now, in the diaspora, I think that it can be a little bit more open and visible in the sense that, as Jurmeta said, we have our camp survivors who are really vocal and about the atrocities that they've seen and that are happening back home. So, this can mean testifying before parliaments and governments, the UN, raising awareness, educating people. It can also mean organizing community schools. So we have a couple of Uyghur schools all around the world abroad, and they mentor youth, they lead all kinds of projects to preserve our culture and our language in exile so that we don't disappear. And a lot of it is also on more of the emotional aspect where I think most of the time the women are expected to kind of be that emotional support for our community and for our loved ones. So that's also, I think, a sign of resilience. And, it's really both on emotional labor and family responsibilities, teaching our culture, our language, all of that, I think, are signs of resilience.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think resilience that's the most used word, I think, for among Uyghurs, especially Uyghur women. But with preservation with dignity, that's our main aim. So my next question is to Rizwanai. In what ways are Uyghur women preserving language, culture, and identity under conditions designed to erase them? So I think Kevsar had mentioned highlighted a few things, but if you can continue, thank you.
Sure. First of all, hello and thank you for having me. Today, I am honored to be among such remarkable women today. And it's a privilege to be here and a responsibility. Thank you for creating this space. I can just add what Kevser said, continue from that point on, because we also mentioned a lot of cultural aspects. Uyghur women, like we Uyghur women have always carried culture through lived practice. Like already mentioned, through spoken language at home, through stories, poetry, faith, and traditions passed from one generation to the next. Under current repression, this role has become even more significant when formal institutions restrict like language and cultural expression. Preservation shifts into private spaces, like into homes and into memory. In the diaspora, like in Switzerland, in Canada, in Germany, in other diaspora, many women organize language classes. It's called Anıtlı Mektep. And they organize cultural workshops, intergenerational gatherings, and youth initiatives. This continues through community engagements and it is like preserving identity under pressure is not only cultural work, it is an affirmation of dignity. And many Uyghur women have turned that resistance into structured community work, not loudly, not for attention, but for consistency. And that quiet consistency is what is powerful, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think 1 hour is not enough to, speak about and talk about how much we contribute as Uyghur women, how much we do to keep going and keep our identity alive. Yeah, but we just we do as much as we do. So my next question is to Kevser. So it's so how does the experience of repression differ for Uyghur women compared to Uyghur men?
Yes, thank you so much for your question. And I think this is really important to address. And I think to understand really this topic, we need to think about intersectionality. So Uyghur women were not only targeted because we're Uyghur, but we're also targeted because of our religion, our gender, and there are multiple facets that really multiplies our vulnerability, right? So we, as Uyghurs, we are already a very vulnerable community, but then those added aspects just multiplies it even more. So often, especially in Turkestan, Uyghur men are often criminalized through securitization narratives. So we'll say like, oh, they're terrorists and they're extremists, or they have some kind of threat to society, which leads to mass detention in concentration camps or jails, or even massacres, right? Whereas even though there are a lot of Uyghur women in camps as well, I think the difference here is that often Uyghur women are also targeted through their body and family structure and emotionally. So earlier we talked about forced sterilization and birth suppression and reproductive control and obviously sexual violence in concentration camps and forced labor camps. And there's also impacts on women's roles as mothers and how we transmit our culture, because it has become politicized in Uzbekistan. And our marriage practices or religious dresses or our domestic way of life. And all of that is also impacted, right? So I think, again, our repression is not only one face, but multifaceted. So in other words, men are really more typically framed as security threats, whereas women are framed as subjects that we need to reform and control and maybe even assimilate through, let's say, forcing them to marry Han Chinese people in the mainland. And in exile, I think that this difference still continues, even though it's not exactly the same, because as I said earlier, Uyghur women, we really carry the emotional labor of advocacy, and we talk about we're often storytellers, and we have our survivors who mostly are women who they always have to relive through their trauma to really give their witness testimonies, and while also trying to kind of be this emotional backbone of our community. And I think also keeping our families intact while trying to navigate through other types of discrimination that you can live abroad in your host country really emphasizes our vulnerability.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate to kind of see and hear how much trauma and pain so Uyghur women cares, and so we, in some cases we can't even imagine so what they've been going through. But as an example, would you be able to tell what kind of tools, for example, available for Uyghur women? So across the world, like, I don't know, maybe some not tools or places or some sorts of NGOs where they can refer for support on well-being, trauma-related, I don't know, treatments, or it's especially designed for Uyghurs and Uyghur women. Have you heard any of those, or around yourself? Have anyone used?
In Canada, I don't think we really have an organization dedicated to mental health for Uyghur women. I know that in the States there is it's not for women only, it's for all Uyghurs, where they do really talk about mental health and how to deal with this genocide, especially for activists, because we have to not only put ourselves out there, but also try to balance our own mental health while we're always talking about this and reliving our trauma, while trying to educate people and raising awareness, and helping other women in our community. But yes, I don't know if Rizwana or Samantha, you remember the name of the one in the US?
It's called Uyghur Wellness Initiative.
Okay. Okay, Uyghur Wellness Initiative, yes. So did you have one? I don't know if there's any in Europe that you guys have something similar?
So there's nothing formal yet, but we do have a core group of psychology experts who are specialized in trauma, especially conflict trauma or post-war situations and atrocity crimes. So we actually designed 2 years ago, we launched this report on basically there was an assessment made based on the experiences of Uyghur women survivors of the camps, and basically we produced a report and the interview process or the methodology behind the report was very much trauma-informed methods of interviews, for example, so that the victims don't have to really relive through the trauma, like Kevsar mentioned, when they're sharing their stories. Of course, we want to use their stories, amplify their stories for advocacy purposes, but we also want to be mindful of the trauma that these individuals carry every time they share it with, stakeholders. So it was a report that was produced 2 years ago, and it was, I think, quite successful. We've done a couple of, it wasn't too big, so we did a couple of consultations with the community in Germany, and we're actually working on something as a follow-up to that to kind of make it more available to the wider audience beyond just Uyghur women and Uyghur camp survivors. So it's something that is in the works, but it's just taking a little bit more time.
Yeah, especially for women, I think in our culture is not really practiced, speak between when it becomes to mental health. So we kind of are close to, we rather leave it on our own than just go and seek support somewhere else or from even within the community. So, for example, we've started a new project here in the UK where we gather every 3 months, and women, whoever likes or have time to join, so they come and we talk about issues. We try to make women say and talk about the current status, like mental health status, is not just and then according to whatever needs are raised. So we look through what options we can find through local services where they are or where it's possible nationwide to find. But there is a line there where they can 24/7 it's open for everyone to use, and we need to make sure that people use it on time and with support as needed. It includes interpreting, translation, we're just passing that information to make sure that women have that option, not just rather stay and suffer on their own. Yes, just talking about mental health, I think what the next question, Rizwanai, it comes to you. Can you talk about the psychological and social impact on Uyghur mothers separated from their children due to detention or state policies?
Sure, thank you. The question. Yes, we can all assume the psychological impact is profound and deeply complex. I think for many Uyghur mothers who are separated from their children, it's not simply a temporary hardship. It's an ongoing state of uncertainty. Numerous documented cases, mothers do not know where their children are, who's caring for them, or under what conditions they're being raised. They don't know what's going on with their children. That uncertainty alone creates chronic anxiety and emotional distress. In addition to cycle separation, there is also fear of cultural separation. When children are placed in state institutions or highly controlled boarding environments, families are not only worried about their safety, but about also loss of language, loss of faith and identity. For a mother, the thought that her child may grow up in disconnected from their heritage, that can be deeply painful. And also in diaspora, we see another layer of psychological strain. Some mothers managed to leave the region, but had to leave their children behind, often because travel restrictions made reunification impossible, and they live with persistent guilt. Even so, it's not their decisions were shaped by survival. This emotional burden can affect mental health, sleep, and daily functioning over many years. And socially, the consequences extend beyond individual families. In Uyghur culture, in Uyghur society, family are foundational. They are not only emotional structures, but also cultural and social anchors. And when these bonds are disrupted, communities feel destabilized, and grandparents, siblings, and extended relatives are affected as well. And this experience creates long-term trauma that does not disappear simply because time passes. Healing requires recognition, access to support, and opportunity for family reunification wherever this is possible. Like we have this woman, like as example, Mihri Gül Tursun, who is now in America. She was separated from her children, and while she was in jail, one of her kids died. Right? But she will never get past this trauma from the 3 children. One just died as a baby. She had no chance to do nothing at all. She was not criminal. She did nothing wrong. The only thing she did was she was being as Uyghur woman. And yeah, we are also to add to before the psychological like wellness initiative things. I'm working really, I'm specifically on the trauma for the Uyghur diaspora, but not only for women, especially for youth, since I'm also mentoring the youth. I also spoke with Zumrata yesterday a little bit about that. I'm having tomorrow with the Uyghur Wellness Initiative, the guy from Uyghur Abdullah from America, we are having meeting about because we have so many Uyghurs who just keep doing whatever they're doing. If it's activism or being motherhood, just keeping the language, culture, everything. But like mentioned a couple of times already in this talk, we don't seek help. we don't know how to seek help. And even if we would know, we wouldn't know where to go, and there's no resources, there is no place to go. So I'm working on it to manage to bring some alternative, maybe an open, peaceful, safe space for Uyghur people in diaspora in Switzerland, but also and maybe online possibility. So you can talk anonymously, you can reach out and stuff. This is on, it's an ongoing work still. So yeah, wish me luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a really good thing, and we hope that it goes very well, and many Uyghurs would refer to that service, which would be very helpful. And it's very unfortunate that state policies really led to such suffering and heartbreaking that we had to go through all this trauma, which would never leave us. So my next question is to Zumratai. As Vice President of the World Uyghur Congress, what challenges do you face as Uyghur woman advocating on the global stage?
That's a loaded question, I think, because I think there are so many levels to this, layers to this. There's definitely one of the biggest issues or challenges I face is once you become a public advocate, you become a target. Obviously, for me, it's not so much about me, but the people, that are related to me, my family members, my extended relatives back home, who are, I believe, living kind of the most severe challenges because they are directly interrogated by Chinese police officers almost on a daily basis for the advocacy work that I'm doing outside of the country. And it's really a way for China to get back at you and to push you into silence, basically. And I think it's one of the most successful techniques and methods that the Chinese government has employed against human rights defenders, whether it's Uyghurs, Tibetans, Hong Kongers, or others. Really, this family retaliation or family hostage diplomacy. So I think not only are they also suffering from that, but also it has huge impact on my well-being because I'm always conflicted internally because I know that my advocacy they're paying the price of my advocacy. So it's something that I have to carry mentally. And I think it really breaks my heart to see that although I know I'm doing something positive, contributing to the cause, that my actions have huge repercussions and consequences for members of my family. And then, of course, beyond that, digital, kind of attacks. I've been, victim of death threats, slander campaigns, character assassinations, deep fakes, phishing attempts, you can name it. It's all of the digital TNR, so digital transnational repression. I've been victim of that, but also beyond that, in spaces like the UN where I'm frequently advocating for Uyghur rights, I regularly face intimidation by Chinese diplomats directly, whether it's them taking photos of me against my will. Just yesterday, Tagesschau and ARD, which are two German media outlets, have published an article and also a short format video interview about my experiences as an advocate in the UN space, how the Chinese government has been using different proxies, for example, through fake NGOs that they bring inside to flood the space with basically Chinese propaganda, but also to retaliate and intimidate human rights defenders. So there are always risks whenever I travel. I've also been followed and in different countries. So that there are definitely security risks that are associated with this work. The more public you are, the more of a target you become. But that's also, nowadays, like couple years ago, I think it was true to say that most of the people who were target of the Chinese government were kind of the human rights defenders, the people who are within that political landscape. However, in the recent years, that has evolved, and ordinary Uyghurs from community members are also being targeted increasingly, whether it's through passport weaponization tactics, for example, Chinese consulates abroad or embassies that are denying passport renewals, that which leads to people being stateless in certain cases, but also, refusing official documents. So I know a lot of Uyghurs have no access to birth certificates, and that also is a huge challenge in the bureaucratic systems in the West, because a lot of places require this when you want to get married, for example, or different occasions. So that's also a hurdle, which is I also consider this as TNR, because the Chinese consular bureaus are basically saying you can obtain these documents only if you return to China. But then upon return, we all know that these people are at risks of detention or torture. So these are very, I think, cases that should not be ignored. So yeah, there are multitude layers to it of the challenges, and I think it's a daily battle as well, because you always have to think about your security, but also the security of others that are around you. So it's something that you have to learn how to live with it. Unfortunately, this is just our reality. But at the same time, they are tools, they are organizations that are developing tools to use to kind of be better equipped to counter these attacks and these security risks as well. So I think over time, I've just kind of implemented some of these best practices into my personal and also professional life.
Thank you, Zumratai. I think, yes, when it comes to TNR, the transnational repression, so we've been hearing for the last 3 to 4 years, I believe, how many cases have been raised within communities, not only Uyghur, but Hong Kongers, Tibetans, Southern Mongolians. So how much civilians being put outside and in exile, how much effort and money the Chinese government spends on building even those illegal stations, police stations, and just to threaten people, say that we can do it, on different soils, not just in China or East Turkestan. And what we must say is that definitely there are tools, security measures. We just need to be brave enough to go and ask for it. So within local governments or wherever we are, informing each other and take those measures before we go somewhere. So, and so recently, so attending one of it was a kind of workshop where the police officer was there, and my question was to how much the police officer knows about the Uyghur issue, and if somebody or something happens to somebody, to an Uyghur, so, and if that Uyghur approaches a police station or just call 999 here in the UK, so how would you respond? How much support and advice you can provide, knowing the situation, the Uyghur situation? But I think that's an important part where it's possible, we need to educate the local government as well. So try to connect through the NGOs or through the government directly and just say, we need to do something about this, because the issue and the concerns are still raising, and every day you wouldn't know what China will come up to, Chinese government will come up next with regard to TNR, and then how much people would suffer, how much cases would raise, on a daily basis. But yeah, definitely we need to think about measures. We need to take care of ourselves. I'd like to ask the next question to Rizwanai. So how can international feminist movements better include any or amplify the voices of Uyghur women? If you have experience working with any feminist groups, or there is a chance or possibility.
Currently, I'm not working with feminist movements, but I'm in a feminist book club since half year, and we read books in German, so maybe this apart. To answer your questions, how can impact feminist movements include international feminist movements have always played a critical role globally in advancing body autonomy, protection from gender-based violence, and equal participation in public life. And the documented experience of Uyghur women, including the coercive birth policies, detention-related abuse, and restrictions on religious and cultural expression, clearly intersect with these core feminist principles. And greater inclusion begins with recognition, like everything. Uyghur women's experience should not be treated as a peripheral or region-specific concepts, but as part of the broader global conversation on women's rights. Beyond recognition, meaningful inclusion requires sustained engagement. This can take several forms, inviting Uyghur women into international forums and conferences, not merely as symbolic speakers, but as contributors to policy discussions, supporting independent research and survival-centered documentation, and ensuring that diaspora activists are protected from intimidation, like Zumra, thank you for telling, like, right? And I saw it lively, how she gets threatened, also myself. So protected from intimidation or transnational repression. But it also means building long-term partnership rather than episodic solidarity. One panel discussion or social media statement is valuable, but structured inclusion requires continuity. And I also think importantly, this is not about policing feminism. It is about applying universal principles consistently. If feminist movements stand for bodily integrity, dignity, and freedom from coercion, then these standards must apply equally, regardless of geography or political complexity. True solidarity is measured not by visibility in a moment, but by commitment over time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very important for us to stay engaged, with not just feminist groups, I think, and NGOs, and but in general. So because we mostly rely on support of other communities and governments, but yeah, well, we need to keep going. So I've got a few questions left, and this question goes to Kaser. So what concrete actions can governments, NGOs, and ordinary citizens take to stand in solidarity with Uyghur women?
Yes, thank you so much for your question, and I think this is a very important one that everybody wants to know. What can we do, or what can they do? I think that, well, on the first hand, I think solidarity comes beyond just statements. It has to be concrete, it has to be structural, and it has to be consistent. Consistency is so important because I know that throughout the years that I've been doing advocacy, there has been a lot of people that come up to me and ask me, what can we do? And then I do give them recommendations, and maybe they will keep at it for a short period of time, but then after that we forget, we have our own lives. And obviously activism is also very draining, so I don't completely blame them. But again, being really consistent in supporting Uyghurs and Uyghur women is so important. So this would be, on the kind of civil society aspect. As for governments, I mean, there are so many things they can do policy-wise, but some of the most, I guess, pressing or realistic things that they can do are strengthening, forced labor import banks, or adopting if they don't have any. In the US, they do have the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which I think is great. In Canada, we have S211, which isn't really for Uyghurs. It's very general, and it essentially tells companies that they should do due diligence to make sure that their supply chain is not tainted with forced labor. But I mean, I don't know if really companies will do that, especially if you want to make a lot of money. So I think putting in place specific things like they did in the US, where they assume that anything that is made in Turkestan is made with forced labor, unless you can prove it otherwise. I think that is much more effective than just a broad. I suggest that you do your due diligence. Obviously, we talked earlier about this kind of trauma-informed settlement services or mental health services. I think that is also very important, and these are also things that these are programs that could be run on the government side, or it can be a collaboration between NGOs and government. And we also touched Zumrata also touched on transnational oppression, and this is also so important, because I mean, there's only so much we can do, right? So much precautions we can take, but we also need that support from government to ensure our safety, not only when we're doing advocacy, but also for our community in general, who are living transnational oppression, even though they are not in the advocacy space. So who do we go to when we encounter transnational oppression? Do we go to the local police? But then if we do, then they'll say, well, this isn't in my jurisdiction. And then do we go to here in Canada, we have the RCMP, which is kind of like the federal police. Do you go to them? And then they will probably tell you to go to CSIS, which is kind of the Canadian version of like FBI, CIA. I mean, and nobody knows where to go to, who to talk to, what protections we have. So I think really having tools to protect these vulnerable communities of transnational oppression is super important, and something that government can do. Directly supporting Uyghur-led initiatives and organizations is so fundamental as well. I mean, we're unfortunately always lacking in funds, and unfortunately advocacy takes money, because we need to get to places, and that costs money when we try to organize events. A lot of the times this money is out of our own pocket, and we try to kind of fundraise, but often it's not very sustainable, because it's hard to always be asking for people for money to say, we have another event, can you please donate again and again? So really having government help us with funding, or at least sponsor certain types of initiatives, would be so helpful. And again, just like not only talking and making statements, but also really acting upon their statement. So if they do make a statement to say, well, we think that what so-and-so or China is doing is wrong, maybe back that up with sanctions, right? So we have statement, sure, but then we have action. that backs that statement. So that is much more efficient than just saying, well, don't do this, or we don't suggest you to do this, because clearly the Chinese government is not going to listen. As for NGOs, I think there could be, I mean, I don't know if it's already in place, but there could be centers where Uyghur women's voices are really centered. And maybe they could provide legal aid for asylum seekers or vulnerable women in third countries. We could also document gender-based violence and address gender-based violence and kind of provide mental health support, and really not only frame Uyghur women as just victims, but also support them so that they can strengthen their own voice and stand up for themselves, right? And again, on this panel, we have amazing women who do this, which is great, but I think we need more of that. But to have more women be able to stand up for themselves, they need support. I think that covers some of my suggestions.
Yes, absolutely. So throughout the history and experience, we see how much work has been done already through NGOs, you know, and individuals, for really been supported by some of them, and they keep providing their support. But you've mentioned that one thing, it's so work I think that needs to be done on, especially what's coming from East Turkestan, out of East Turkestan, and what has been used on a daily basis, and how much the consumer. So if we look at the main consumer in this world, I think it's us women. So how much stuff, how much clothes, you know, cosmetics and everything. So we consume, and nowadays what we have on market is this cheap products coming from China, which are really attractive. And I think we should call NGOs, individuals, and specifically our own community, our own women, on how much and how careful we need to be on this, and how much effort we need to put, and not to buy stuff coming from China. Among myself and yourself, I'm sure there are people and women who still buying things from Temu because they're cheap. And if you recently noticed that Temu has been selling so much iCut Atlas patent stuff, if you just put iCut or Atlas, it will come up with a variety of bags, clothes, you know, fashion, jewelries, phone cases. They are really cheap, and you just see the passion, the women, how they buying it. So some of them are selling them even, so which is a totally inappropriate, just you know, taking into account what's been going on. And this is a moral thing, first of all, but we need to urge people to take actions on that and boycott things from China, for sure.
Yes, and if I may add, especially, you know, when it comes to forced labor, women are the biggest target of forced labor in East Turkestan, and because our men are either in concentration camps or jailed or massacred, and so a lot of these products and goods, they are made by women, especially when it comes to clothing or, you know, fashion or maybe shoes, things like that, or everyday goods. They are made by Uyghur women. So yes, overconsumption definitely is a very big problem, and unfortunately, it doesn't help our case.
Yeah, but there's so much evidence of you know, a slave labor being used, or slave labor. So that's why we need to be mindful what we're using, where it comes from, you know, and it's very important. That's the kind of major contribution. It starts from us, first of all, and then so we keep going, doing work, campaigns with other angels, other individuals, wherever it's possible, when it's possible. Yeah, so, and I have a final question to Zimratai. I know we just ran out of time, but what message would you like to share directly with women around the world, or who could see this program, who may not yet know about the situation facing Uyghur women?
I think my message is quite simple. It is just to say that if, as a woman, you ever made a decision about your own body, your family, your children, the languages that you speak, the religion that you practice, your privacy, if you've made any decisions regarding these things, I think this should concern you, that the Uyghur issue is not just for us Uyghurs to care about and to carry, but it's also for everyone to stand in solidarity with us. I believe that this is a responsibility of everyone, because atrocity crimes have happened in the past, and for far too many times, for far too long, people have stayed silent when the atrocity, the genocide was not taking place in their territorial, in their territory. And I think we would not have witnessed the Holocaust, the genocide in Rwanda, in Bosnia, if people, spoke loudly, quickly. And unfortunately, we're entering the 10 years since the camps. 10 years since the camps started, 10 years since we've lost relatives in the camps, 10 years since Uyghur women have gone through all of these horrible crimes. And we're still looking for allies to stand in solidarity with us. And as Kausar said, for governments to go beyond just condemnations and empty statements. So I think the least that people could do, and the least that women can do on this occasion, on International Women's Day, is to stand in solidarity with those who have no voice, who have no opportunities to speak for themselves, to challenge the states, because the challenges or the violations that Uyghur women face, this is being perpetrated by a state, and it's being over the years it's been in a way institutionalized. So it's state backed violence against the women, and so I think we're not speaking about some abstract violations. We're really speaking about the most intricate violations, how a state can basically tell you what to do in your day-to-day life, what you cannot eat, what you can eat, how you can dress, how you can carry yourself, how you can speak, which schools you decide or not decide to send your children to. So these are all very concrete violations, and I think the solidarity of women abroad, women everywhere matter. And I think if we can speak about Iran, if we can speak about Palestine, if we can speak about what's happening in South Sudan, we can also speak about the Uyghur women, the situation that they're going through. And also, one very simple thing, which is very concrete as well, is if you have in your city Uyghur community, reach out to them, make friends with Uyghur women, listen to their stories, amplify their stories, give them space, give them platforms. And I don't know, if you can't even do that, then perhaps go to Uyghur restaurant, enjoy some Uyghur food and culture, at least you're supporting something. So I think those are very concrete things, and I think solidarity is really something that we should all be doing, because injustice somewhere is injustice everywhere. So that would be my message.
Thank you very much. It's very direct and clear message suggestions. Definitely unity makes a community stronger. And so thank you very much to you all, to everyone who stands with Uyghur women, not just today, but every single day. So we, as Uyghur women, we're not only victims of repression. So we are educators, we are advocates, cultural guardians, legal scholars, mothers, and just leaders. And on this International Women's Day, let's just remember that the fight for all women's rights must include Uyghur women. So thank you very much again, and it was very pleasant program. Thanks for sharing all your experience, thoughts, and be with us today.